Financialization has created kind of a billionaire class and then all the rest of us. And the middle class has really gotten eviscerated in the process. I mean, the interest rate is the price of money. The price of money determines how capital is allocated. If the society correctly allocates its capital, everybody gets better off. I think the top 1% of the country owns 92% of the wealth today. I mean, this is just incredibly absurd. I mean, you guys know this. It all starts with the money. If we had sound money, things would be a lot better across a lot of dimensions. If you understand Bitcoin, it means you've got a clear understanding of, what a fair monetary protocol looks like and ought to be. The notion that mankind might have solved that problem by creating a form of money that cannot be subject to tomfoolery because it's mathematically driven, that is a big, big, big deal.
Larry, welcome back to the Bitcoin Infinity Show. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys. It's I've really enjoyed our past conversations. I'm looking forward to this one, Knut and Luke.
Yeah, us too, of course. I think the last one was in Madeira, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was at that soccer stadium, which was a lot of fun. I had a great time over there. What a great conference.
We had this great big wall behind us with meat on it. You remember that?
I do remember that now. Yeah, yeah, and pictures of Messi and Ronaldo and all those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was fantastic. And a lot has happened since in our lives, and a lot has happened on the island, and a lot has happened in your life. And
all true.
Yeah, and I guess the third of those three is what we're here to talk about. So what's been going on with Larry Lepard since we last saw each other in Madeira? What is it now?
Yeah, that was March, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, let me give you the timeline. I'll take people through the timeline. So sometime after that, I want to say in April or May, I was watching a political show on TV, just something on CNN or whatever, which I try to avoid watching, but somehow I got to watching it, and I was watching blue people and red people scream at each other and criticize each other and argue with each other, and I came away just incredibly frustrated because I thought to myself, they're all arguing about the wrong stuff. Things that are important for sure, but when the underlying issue really is that the money is broken, and that was never discussed. They weren't talking about deficits. They weren't talking about inflation. They weren't talking about any of that. What I believe are kind of the core issues that are driving the difficulty in our society today. And it really angered me. I thought somebody has got to tell this story of what's going on and try to reorient these people to think about, this core issue. And then I thought, well, okay, but some people have done it, and I want to give them a ton of credit because they've done a great job of it, and that borrowed heavily in my book. I mean, I use a lot of their stuff, and those would be, Saifedean Amos with the Bitcoin Standard, which is a fabulous book, and Lynn Alden with Broken Money, another fabulous book, Jeff Booth with, the Price of Tomorrow, and the fabulous book, and a lot of other macro analysts that I've relied on, to gather information. I thought to myself, somebody's got to put this in a form that's easy for everybody to understand. It's not a textbook. It's more of a story because people like to read stories and narratives, and people don't really read textbooks, and explain, why things are so messed up and then how to fix it. And so that was really kind of the genesis of the idea. And I didn't know if I could do it. And then I as time went by, I got more and more confident I could do it, and I've done the best I can with it, and we'll see if it's any good. But I felt like I probably fit in kind of a unique position because I've been at Sound Money for a long time, before Bitcoin even. And this is, don't get me wrong, this is a Bitcoin book that supports Bitcoin massively. But pre-Bitcoin, gold was our only choice, and I'm a gold guy. And I've been at this battle for a long, long time, supported Ron Paul and so forth, and been a very strong advocate of ending the Fed. And, I just thought I've got, and I meet a lot of great Bitcoiners, many of whom are very young, and they weren't even around when a lot of these older events were going on that I saw take place that are all messed up. And I thought, well, so I've got kind of institutional memory, right? I can say, hey, I remember when that happened, and I remember how we reacted to it. So I kind of took all those and I put them in a book, and I made it a story. And like with any story, they're good guys, they're heroes and villains. The villains are the central bankers. The heroes, in my view, are the Sound Money crew. And I just kind of tried to tell a story and make it readable and make it enjoyable, but also make it educational, because I think that most people really don't think about this very much. They don't understand the issue of sound money. They don't understand why Keynes was wrong. They don't understand why deflation is a good thing. They don't understand that interest and savings have to balance each other out, and that the interest rate is the price of money. I mean, all those things, most people in the world just have no clue on those topics. And yet those topics are what inform, societal well-being, right? I mean, the interest rate is the price of money. The price of money determines how capital is allocated. And the way that if the society correctly allocates its capital, everybody gets better off. And that's what we want. We want more prosperity for everybody, top, bottom, middle, all of it. And that happens when the interest rate's correctly set. And it doesn't happen when you have a Politburo-like organization like the Fed setting the interest rate. They go to 0, they go to 20, they're all over the place, and nobody can plan. Business people get hurt, individuals get hurt when the bubbles burst. And so, so that's kind of the thesis and the genesis of the book. And I've kind of told a story that I'm hoping, anyone with people without a financial background, and I tested it, and I tested a lot of people without financial backgrounds, got a lot of feedback. I mean, perfect example is early on in the book, somebody said, "What's the Federal Reserve?" So I put in a footnote and said, "Well, this, we all know what the Federal Reserve is, but your average person may not." So we explained that. And I took suggestions, and my wife made a great suggestion. She said, "You need a chapter in here on skepticism, because everybody's skeptical of this, and you got to explain why they shouldn't be." So, that's how that chapter came about. So, so here it is. It's almost done. As you guys know, we're all working to get it in press ready form. And hopefully within a few weeks, you can buy it. Well, you can buy it now as a Kindle book, but it's pre-order, but I mean, you'll be able to read it in a few weeks, hopefully.
Hello there. You should use code Infinity like everywhere on the internet. For instance, for the MicroStrategy Bitcoin for Corporations conference. For BTC Prague, for BTC Hell, come to Helsinki in August. And make sure to check out Stamp Seed, which is a fantastic little seed plate. You can get the Infinity over 21 million special plates that we collaborated with them in making. Use code Infinity for a discount. Same thing goes for our favorite hardware wallet, the Bitbox 02. So it's bitbox.swiss to get that. The Bitcoin Advisor for Bitcoin inheritance planning, and so on and so forth, and general advice, bitcoinadvisor.com. And make sure to like, subscribe, and brush your teeth and all that for the bitcoininfinity.com, and get some stuff and some books. Great to have you here.
No, skepticism is what brought me to Bitcoin in the first place. Absolutely. Like I was a skeptic towards fiat money. I didn't really,
Right.
it didn't make sense to me that everything
Right.
would have to go up in price. And I think I put this in one of the books, that the Federal Reserve is the Galactic Empire. We ANCAPs are the rebellion, and Bitcoin is the photon torpedoes fired at the Death Star's thermal exhaust pipe. And it's just about to blow.
I mean, I think that's a pretty good model for what's going on here. And and by the way, we're winning. I mean, the Fed is really in a lot of trouble. So in that respect, the book is kind of timely. I mean, I'm hopping on a trend that we're already, the train is running down the track pretty hard, and it's this is a really timely issue that, in my opinion, is going to explode onto everybody's radar screen, with the next big print. So, thus the book.
Yeah, and that's the name of the book, by the way, the big print.
Right.
And we've had the opportunity, Luke and I have had the opportunity to read it early and help you out a bit with it, which
Absolutely.
we're super proud of.
A lot of help on it. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
I mean, I read through a early draft and I loved it. And Luke has read a more updated version and is working on it right now. And he loves it too, I know. And we're so looking forward to this launch, because this is great. And this is not only Bitcoin for boomers. This is is something else.
It's Bitcoin for everybody. This is it's a broad societal movement. And that's, I've been talking to people about what will you measure book success as? And we'll sell some books to Bitcoiners, no doubt about that. That's not the market. I mean, it is the market, but that's not the real market here is everybody else who's asleep and doesn't understand why they're getting screwed, and doesn't understand how the central banks have done it to us, and can't see all the corruption. And all they know is that their groceries are getting more expensive, and it's hard. And they're afraid. They're afraid about the monetary situation, and understandably so. And so many people in this country are hurting as a result of it. And the book is a call to action on how we can change this and make it better and stop that pain. That's and so in my view, it will be successful if we can cross the chasm, so to speak, of hardcore Bitcoiners, they'll love the book, but does an average person who doesn't know anything about monetary policy read it and get it and go, oh wow, I now I really get it. That's the goal. That was the goal of the book.
No, but I think the general population is sort of primed for this stuff because, like, the Overton window has shifted with
right.
Milei in Argentina and Bukele in El Salvador, and now the second coming of Trump here with Elon and Ron Paul as some kind of advisor and stuff. Like the topics of discussion are different now than last time he was in office. And
there is no question. And there are all kinds of signs. I mean, the debt stuff is getting louder.
Yeah.
Books like Chris Leonard's book, The Lords of Easy Money. I mean, here's a mainstream New York Times reporter wrote a book really critical of the Fed. And by the way, he was applauded by the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, etc. I mean, the Overton window is clearly shifting. I mean, I think the problem, the problem that we're all going to resolve in this fourth turning is what Robert Breedlove coined as what is money, and and what kind of central bank should we have, if any, and what kind of fractional reserve banking should we have, and those problems are going to get resolved in this fourth turning and crisis, and it's becoming more and more clear to more and more people that that's really the issue.
No, and I mean, there are so many other signs, like in other parts of the internet, that Mark Zuckerberg, for instance, now coming out with how much pressure he was under to censor stuff during COVID and all of this. It's like the whole, I don't know if he's truly changed or if he needs to do that to speak to the new audience,
he might be covering his butt because he's worried about them coming out.
Yeah, but either way, it's telling you something about the general discussion going on and how much people notice.
There's no doubt that we lived in a centralized world, and I've even got a chapter on that. The title of the chapter is why we will be saved: decentralization.
Yeah,
and decentralization is just technology is it's finally come around to save us here because it's such a great trend.
No, the revolution will not be centralized.
Exactly. I mean, think of what the internet's done to information sharing and to the legacy networks and stuff, and just the ability to source more information has been fantastic.
No, and once you grok what this implies, that we've lived under false money for 5,000 years, and that we've finally got a way to get out of it, and it doesn't have to be this way. Like that's to me, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, and it just blew my mind, and I kind of instantly knew that this is what I have to devote my life to now, like, because this is my big.
Well, and that's why you wrote your great book, Infinity Divided by 21 Million. I mean, it's once you understand this and you realize just how big it is, it's like, I don't know, it's like you discovered fire or the wheel or the printing press or air flight, or I mean, it's just the notion of money that doesn't debase over time. I mean, we've spent thousands of years, mankind's never had this before. And so, never had it before. Oh, wow, that means things are going to be significantly different. And there's actually part of the book I talk about that some people say it's a little hyperbolic, but I don't think so. I mean, I think finance will someday be looked at before Bitcoin and after Bitcoin,
Absolutely.
Because it just changes so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The Federal Reserve is Blockbuster Video. We're just waiting.
That's a great comparison. Yeah, that's right. And you've got streaming services.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get into the book, because, as you say, this is not it's not a book for boomers, and it's not a book for Bitcoin. It's a book for everyone. And it's divided into parts. And the first thing it does is that it describes the problem. So can you go a little into the book?
Yeah. I mean, it's so a lot of people look at like the GFC and the bailouts, and more recently what I consider this fourth turning, and everyone thinks this is the beginning of the problem. But well, first of all, as you alluded to, the book is very clearly decided into two sections: the problem and the solution, and they're about equal in length. And obviously, I don't think you can address the solution until you fully understand the problem. So I've tried to start off with laying out the problem, the wealth inequality, the consistent inflation, how much worse it got when we went off the gold standard in 71, the financialization of the economy, et cetera, et cetera. And so I kind of take people through a quick history. I summarize a lot of what's contained in, The Creature from Jekyll Island, but I take people through a quick history of how governments have abused the monetary power really through millennia, but more particularly, I'm looking at the United States from 1789. And, I look a lot of things. As I researched the book, I learned a lot, actually. I mean, they started debasing the money to pay for the War of 1812, and they suspended specie redemption, and then they did it again in the Civil War, and then they did it again in World War I. And one of the things you come to see is that wars are extremely expensive, and governments generally can't pay for them through taxation because nobody will put up with the taxes. So they print the money to pay for them, is what they do. Which is why, if we go to a sound money standard, one could argue that then we won't have wars. But so I kind of walk everybody through the history, and actually those chapters are tough sledding. Some people may not want to read them, and I start off with a quick summary of the problem and how basically, the elites and the bankers and the government and the bankers have made a deal with each other that kind of gives them benefits over the rest of us, and they in a sense, that's why we're getting screwed. Because wealthy people know how to make inflation work in their advantage. They actually get wealthier with inflation. They like it because they can borrow cheap. They can buy assets that give them a yield, and it's what we all describe as quintillionaires. So that's really the heart of the problem, that the monetary system is rigged by the wealthy and government, and they're in cahoots with each other. The government likes it because it gets all their wars and all their programs paid for, and the wealthy like it because they know how to game it and get wealthier. And the rest of us pay higher prices for groceries because we don't have the advantage. We don't have either of those advantages the government has, right? So that's kind of the fundamental thesis. And then but how do we get to that being the case where, now there's a chart in there, which I love, which shows that, I think the top 1% of the country owns 92% of the wealth today. I mean, this is just incredibly absurd. And again, part of the reason I wrote the book was I remember growing up in the 70s, and there was a big, broad middle class. I was a part of it. And, the guy who ran Ford Motor he lived down the street from us, but, he probably made 3 or 4 times what my dad made, not 500 times what my dad made. And, and I played with his kids. And so, that's gone away. I mean, financialization has created, a kind of a billionaire class, and then all the rest of us, and the middle class has really gotten eviscerated in the process. And, but again, there were many, many steps, right? I mean, there was, the 1800s, some smaller steps, but the biggest ones really started with the Fed in 1913, Roosevelt in 1933, and then Nixon in 71, taking us off the gold standard. But even since that, it's gotten worse. I mean, Greenspan decided he wanted to manage to push the stock market up, so he printed a lot of money. Well, Bernanke said, hold my beer, I can print more than you. And 2008 came along, and he printed an enormous amount of money, and then he lied to Ron Paul about it and said he was going to reduce the balance sheet. And of course, he knew he couldn't do that, would never do that. And he said it was a 1.4, and he said it was going to take it back down to the 800 that it was before the GFC. And of course, the Fed balance sheet today is $7 trillion, right? And so, but with each step, they took actions to enhance their wealth and protect themselves at the expense of all the rest of us. We all pay for the higher prices. And yet, if you're in that system and you know how to game it, you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, these PE guys, and I was one of them in my earlier part of my career. And I actually think that lends some credibility to the book. I mean, I sat at some of these tables. I know who some of these people are. They know me. I know them. And, throughout my career, I eventually kind of made a choice to go in a different direction because I didn't like what was going on there. I mean, you could just see how broken this whole thing was. So, so it's, I don't know. I think I've gotten off your question a little bit. But,
No,
that's the problem. So I kind of lay out the problem in spades, and I don't think we're going to have a hard time convincing the average person that something's wrong. I mean, I think the average person intrinsically senses that something's wrong. I mean, they see these bubbles, they see, inflation, they see how hard it is to get by. They worry about their kids buying a house. They worry about their retirement. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that unless you're in the upper 20%, life is tough, and it shouldn't necessarily have to be this way. And some of us, that's the other thing. Again, I point out, I can remember when it wasn't this way. I remember the 70s and 80s; they were great, and that's I feel sad for people born into this world who couldn't see and don't remember what it was like in those days when the money was sounder. So. And then, of course, part 2 of the book is, how do we fix this? Okay, great. You've described a problem. That's no fun. We all know it's there, but what's the solution? And so, I kind of walk through that, and we know all, Bitcoiners know where I'm going with this, but other people don't. And so I try to, again, at a first principles basis, take people into Bitcoin and try and help orange pill them. And, in a very understandable way, not trying to make anything complicated. In fact, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So.
No, and I mean, I remember when Obama took over after Bush, right? And that's when it was an eye opener for me, when both sides were just pro bailing out the banks, and that's when some kind of penny dropped for me, even though I was watching it all from a distance. It's like
I had so much hope that he might try and reform the system, and then he appointed Larry Summers and Robert Rubin to position. I thought, oh shit, here we go again. Right.
I mean, the expression is kicking the can down the road, but I view it more as like rolling the snowball further down the hill, because
that's a good one too. They both work. It's the same idea.
Yeah, but the snowball gets bigger. The can is still just a can.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So the snowball, it snowballs, and you have the longer you let it go, the bigger the crash, right?
Right. And one as one of the chapters in the book is named as, two important chapters are Stein's law, that if something cannot go on forever, it will end. And then the chapter right after that was taken with her permission from Lynn Alden, which is Nothing Stops This Train, which is to say that we're in a fiscal mess that something's going to break here. And in a sense, we're going to have to go through a monetary reset or restructuring of some kind. It's just a matter of whether it's controlled or uncontrolled, and it's only a matter of time before it happens. But it appears to be getting pretty close.
So this might be a tough question. Did we do this to ourselves, in your mind, like by letting them have us use their money? Like, did we do it to ourselves, or I'm not only speaking for like the population or everyone in a fiat system. Did we do it to ourselves or not?
Well, I mean, look, in 71, I was 13, so I wasn't even voting for Nixon. So, it's, to a degree. I mean, some people, we voted for politicians who spend more than, they should, and that's made the problems worse. And everybody kind of wants something for nothing. So there's certainly been an element to which we've all kind of quote unquote done it to ourselves. But also and we've distracted ourselves and I think that a lot of the founding fathers wrote about and said how in order to keep a democracy and a republic operating properly, citizenry has to be self-informed and smart and demand that the people in positions of power behave in a responsible fashion. And, when everybody's watching reality TV and football and not paying attention to all this, it's pretty easy for the government to just kind of slip all these bad policies in place. And, we bitch, but there's not much you can do about it. I mean, take the 2008 example, when they were going for TARP right after the banks failed, and Paulson went up, and begged Nancy Pelosi to give him $700 billion. Everyone wrote, a lot of people wrote to congressman, called their congressman, no way, do not bail these guys out. They failed, let them fail. And so the first vote on TARP was no. It was a resounding no. And then, the market went down 12% very quickly. And the bankers went back to the Congress and said, look, if you guys don't do this, the entire economy is going to implode. And, which is what the bankers always do. They hold a gun to your head and say, give me the money or else I'm going to blow your economy away, right? And so Congress voted for TARP. And I mean, I remember the polls at the time were like 95% of the country opposed it. Don't bail those people out. They did it to themselves. They've done it to all of us. Let them fail. And I mean, actually in the book, there's a policy prescription where I say, I would love to have been the guy negotiating on behalf of the government. You know what I mean? Okay, banks, yeah, we'll bail you out. We don't want any of your depositors to fail. We'll use the Fed's balance sheet to give them all the money they need. But guess what? We get a 5-year clawback on all your salaries and bonuses. You resign. You're banned from working in the financial business. And we're going to bring in small town bankers from all over America to clean up this mess. People that are honest. I mean, that would have been the right solution, because when I say, that the 2008 was a crime, a lot of people say to me, well, what else could they have done? They had to do it. Yeah, it's a bailout. Yeah, it's unfair, but they had to do it. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They could have, they could have punished the wrongdoers. I mean, a good example of prior, and this is talked about in the book, and a prior example, the S&L crisis in the early 90s, 800 people went to jail. I mean, it was the same thing. It was kind of a credit bubble, and there were a lot of banks, they were making bad loans. They knew it. They were paying themselves huge salaries. There was all kinds of excess. And, they brought in a guy to clean it up, and they sent people to jail, and that didn't happen in 08. So, and that's because the bankers, have a lot of political power, and they were able to exercise that power to protect themselves. I mean, they have a no-lose game where, heads they win and tails we lose. They made a ton of money, and then they throw it in your face. I mean, in the year when they failed and were bailed out, they paid out $20 billion of bonuses to senior executives. $20 billion. The year they failed, that was all just taxpayer money that we all wrote. And we all can think, well, it's they had to save them, and it's not that painful. Well, but that explains why the price of gasoline's high. That explains why the price of food is high. Creating those monetary units, we all pay for it. But we pay in a different way. We don't pay in terms of taxation. We pay in terms of higher prices. And all of us pay it.
Yeah. So like this is not a U.S. only problem. Far from it. It's like everywhere in the world, right?
Absolutely.
So in your mind, is democracy itself like a system that is so flawed that it inevitably at some point leads to corruption? Like if you just let it play out over a century or something, will it inevitably lead to corruption? Is that what we're seeing now, like everywhere?
I don't know. I haven't, I'm not a political theorist, and I haven't thought all that through. I mean, I think the founding documents were pretty damn good. And, I think sadly, we've gotten away from them. But maybe with some reforms, we can go back and reset it and try again. I mean, I think that, term limits would help, and there are other things, but I don't know. I'm not really a political theorist, and so I'm not going to comment. I mean, I generally support dictatorships, but, I think a republic, an intelligent, well-managed republic. I mean, I think probably the most important thing that America's got to return to is where, citizen responsibility returns, and people actually pay attention and care about their civic life, recognizing that it's important. I mean, that they, who they vote for, or what they, and they make noise when they see things that are wrong. Because that's how we right the wrongs that are out there. So, and by the way, it's easier to do that when you have sound money and you have savings and you have the time to figure the things out. I mean, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people are hurting, and don't, aren't civically involved is they're working 3 jobs trying to put food on the table. I mean, Christ, writing their congressman is not something they're going to take the time to do, right? And so, it all. I mean, you guys know this. It all starts at the money. It really does. It all starts at the money. If we had sound money, things would be a lot better across a lot of dimensions.
Yeah, it would be way harder to rig systems and rig them against people.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes to go down. It's not.
No, but it's really super easy. Like with Bitcoin, you can have an enormous stack. You can be a sailor or someone and have like 2% of the supply. It doesn't matter. The only thing you can do with them is spend them on other people, and therefore they will like trickle trickle down sooner or later. Even if it takes generation, doesn't matter. You can't leverage the system. That's the point.
That is the point. And more importantly, and you've said this many times, this is your whole theme, is just, it's a mathematically driven system. It's actually scientific in nature, as opposed to, touch and feel, what some central banker is saying today. I mean, it's hilarious. These guys came out last week, and I think it was Waller, said, well, we think we're making good progress towards the 2%, so we're going to be able to cut rates. Well, meanwhile, the PPI is going up at a very sharp rate, and inflation seems to be coming back in some areas. I mean, yeah, look, that's just no way to run a railroad. We need to have a free market here in the cost of money. Bitcoin's the ultimate mathematically driven free market, I guess is the point I'd like to make, and which you guys agree with, right?
Absolutely. Like I came to this from a true skeptic's perspective. Like I'm trying to spread a skeptic's version of the gospels here, I guess, because to me, Bitcoin is the only type of money that does not require faith in something you can't prove. Like on every dollar bill, there's a "In God We Trust" written on it, and I just can't help thinking, well, in Bitcoin we don't trust, we will verify. Like,
that's exactly right. I mean, the faith. I mean, I think Satoshi even wrote it. I mean, there's a lot of evidence of governments abusing the faith that they're supposed to have in their currency system. It's just too tempting and too easy to do, and so it happens. I mean, there's a long, sad tale. The book talks about that. I've got a lot of great quotes. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, Voltaire knew it. Fiat money always goes to its intrinsic value zero. But there are also, a lot of U.S. presidents knew it. I mean, Garfield. I got a great quote on Garfield that I dragged out of Tootie Shelton's book, and I mean, he understood it. I mean, Daniel Webster understood it. Jefferson understood it. I mean, monetary shenanigans have been around for a long, long time. I mean, it's in the Bible, honest weights and measures, which means there were people trying to cheat. Hey, this is an ounce when it wasn't really an ounce, and so they're trying to shortchange you on whatever you were buying or selling. And it's monetary tomfoolery has a long and checkered history, and the notion that mankind might have solved that problem by creating a form of money that cannot be subject to tomfoolery because it's mathematically driven, that is a big, big, big deal. And I think we're just starting to come to grips with it. I mean, those of us who see it and believe in it, we've kind of come to grips with it, and that's why we're so excited about it. But I think the rest of the world is going to come to grips with it over the next 20 years. And very much in the same way, the internet is a big, big deal. I got involved in the internet in 93, and it was just because somebody said, here, send me something to my internet address. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, you have Novell, right? Which was basically, it was a mini internet for within a building or within an office. You could send email messages. I said, well, imagine you had Novell for the whole world. You could send an email message anywhere in the world for free. I was like, really? He said, yeah. The government developed it. DARPA developed it in 68 and 9 with TCP/IP. I was like, holy shit, that's a really powerful idea, And I mean, I still don't think we've seen all the full impact of the internet. I mean, we've seen the big networks get disintermediated by Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson. I mean, there's a lot, which is beautiful, and by guys like you. I mean, it's here we are on opposite sides of the world, telling a story, communicating something to people who are willing to listen that they can't find anywhere else. They're not going to find a conversation like this on CBS, or CNN. Right.
No, I think we're similar here because and you were like when I discovered the internet, like I was in my teens or late teens, the 96. I'm born 76, so like say the internet took off 95 or something, where it's really started to.
That's where it really started going. Yeah.
Yeah. And I quite early on realized how big that was, but I didn't act on it. I didn't become like a computer programmer or a network expert or anything. I became a seaman instead, which in hindsight seems kind of stupid. But this is part of why I started giving so much attention to Bitcoin, because I didn't want to make that mistake again. When I saw something and I saw that other people didn't see it, I knew I had to
Well, there was pattern recognition on your part. You'd seen this model and you knew it was going to happen again. That's exactly what happened with me. Exactly. And this model changes all investing. And there's a chapter in the book that shows this, how, so I was taught to invest based on price earnings ratios and price to cash flow and growth and all those kinds of things. Here's the thing that's happened, guys. It never happened before, the internet and before network models. There were never any investments that went up thousands of percent in 20 years or less. They just didn't exist. Okay. Ford Motor probably went up thousands of percent, but over the course of 80 years or something. And here you are, Amazon, Google, Facebook. These are all companies that increased in value thousands of percent in less than 20 years. And that's the power of Metcalfe's law and the power of networking and the power of network investing. And so here we have a worldwide monetary network that, in my opinion, could go up thousands of percent. And so, and we're not in the beginning. We're not Max Kaiser buying at $1 or Trace Meyer buying at 25 cents. But, we're not at the end. We're still at a very low penetration rate. Jesse Meyer's chart, I love, shows, $2 trillion of internet market cap, or I'm sorry, Bitcoin market cap, over $900 trillion of total investable assets. That's 0.2%. And, so Bitcoin could go to $1 million a coin, and it would still only be 2%. And this is the best form of money that mankind has ever seen. So, I don't think people are prepared for how quickly and how high this thing is going to go. And and again, that's the book. I'm trying to save people, trying to help people, trying to help the person that just can't seem to get ahead because they're getting, their savings get inflated.
No, and this is something I talked to Jeff a lot about, like the inability of people's inability to see exponentials, like to really understand exponentials, because they are weird and they're hard to get your head around.
Yeah, compounding it's like the seventh wonder of the world, right? Isn't that what Einstein said?
Yeah. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. But the thing is, after let's say we're hyper Bitcoinized. In my mind, that means that productivity per year goes up. It can only continue to be exponential because the free market is so much more well-oiled and free of interventionism at that point. Yeah. So, like the example, it feels like I give it on every show now, Luke, like with the apple tree farmer, where year one, he can buy 1 apple tree, year 2, 2 apple trees, year 3, 4, and year 5, 8, and so on and so forth, because he can.
It gets to be billions of apple trees a lot faster.
Yeah, and he gets to feed a lot of people. Yeah. But if he's taxed at 50%, or if there's inflation, he never gets to the second tree. So, like we're depriving ourselves of all of these exponential effects that could just enhance. But when you have Bitcoin, and you have this dream scenario that we're all working towards, then every effort of every single human being is of benefit to every other single human being, which is just absolutely bonkers and absolutely mind-blowing. And we can't it's impossible to wrap your head around how good that is. Well, it sounds utopian, but I'd say when they call us a cult, I'd say that we're the only ones that are not in a cult. We're the ones breaking free from the cult of this fiat banking, satanic, whatever.
I would agree with you, and I would also say that just proper capital allocation will just stop people from wasting money on stupid shit, and that's just a good example. One of the ones I use, and actually Luke Groman did a nice job with Preston recently on a podcast talking about this. We pissed away $8 trillion in the Middle East recently. In the last 20 years, and to secure Afghanistan, to give it back, and to secure Iraq so that China could buy all their oil. That's just, we might as well just flush the money down the toilet. You know what I mean? Imagine if that $8 trillion had been spent on infrastructure, productivity, nuclear power, a lot of things that would have made the well-being of our citizens better, as opposed to, building tanks and guns and things that went to, that are rusting now in Afghanistan. It's, and I would contend, I think most Bitcoiners would contend that, if you take the power to print money away from the state's going to have a really hard time conducting big wars. And And that's a good thing because war is incredibly destructive to, both people who suffer from the injuries and deaths, but also just to the overall economy, because it doesn't produce anything. It sucks resources and destroys them. So
There's nothing more destructive, I would say.
Exactly.
Like, what would be
Exactly.
more destructive than that?
right.
And then,
So
yeah, go on.
no, that's it. I mean, that's my point.
Yeah, so this, I don't know if you heard this, but like it resonates. What you're saying resonates so deeply with me because and I think this had a lot to do with why I became a Bitcoiner. And it's a saying from my grandfather's, from my grandfather. I never met my grandfather; he died before I was born. Like my grandfather on my father's side, but his saying like trickled down the generations and down to me, and I've been pondering it ever since first I heard it. And it's a saying. That which you can do without, you own. It's as simple as that.
I like
So
that.
if you can resist the urge to own something, you already own the thing. Like if you can truly
interesting.
psychologically do that, and I think like that is, yeah, I get it. Like that's it. Some things you actually do need, and you actually do want them, and you can't
Right.
do without them. But if you can, like for instance, I don't crave any Lambo. So in
No, neither do
in
I.
effect, I own all the Lambos. I own the urge. Like and there's so much depth to that saying. So
Yeah,
I
gotta
just
get
think
my
it's the
head
most
around that one,
beautiful.
but it's a fascinating thought. I mean, it's very stoic, and it's also a very long
Yeah.
time preference, which is a big
Yeah.
Bitcoin theme. I mean, about the only thing. I had lunch yesterday with George Bodine, who's a good friend of mine. He's also written up in the book. The only thing I'm kind of locked in on is I want to be able to eat steaks. I really do. Steak is my equivalent of Lambo.
Yeah, same here. I mean,
And they're not cheap, but you know what? They taste really good.
no. Some things you really can't do without, but it's more. But I like the whole thing because it's sort of, to me, that is exactly what Bitcoin represents. Like, get rid of all the stupid consumerism and people
Right.
buying frivolous shit they don't need.
Right.
Margaritaville mixer with a salsa dispenser. Let's just pour your favorite salsa on the top and it comes out in the bottom. Like, we don't need that kind of stuff. Like,
Right.
So I think that it perfectly encapsulates like what Bitcoin is to me. Like people think it is about getting rich fast, but it's about not getting poor slow. Like it's about
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, it gives you back your time, your freedom, and your optimism. I mean, I think one of the great tragedies of fiat world are these people, and my father was one of them, and I'm sure everyone knows people like this who retire with what they kind of thought at one point in time was enough money. And then, of course, inflation just relentlessly eats away at it, and costs of everything they do. By the time, if they happen to live longer than expected, or even normal lifespan, they find that what they thought was enough really isn't enough because of the inflation that's eating away at their savings. And so, and it leads to, a lot of people just can't even retire. They're just going to have to be able to work until they drop, which is really sad because we ought to be able to, every human being ought to be able to produce enough excess value that, at the tail end of their life, as their faculties start to slip, that they can, enjoy themselves and not be, not have to be a greeter at Walmart, you know what I mean, to pay the bills. And, that's one of the things that fiat has taken away, I think, from this country. And it's very sad. There's so many sad stories. I mean, but, and the flip of those sad stories is there's a very bright future if we can get it going in the right direction, as you point out. I mean, and that's why the book is very much a balance of pessimism and optimism. I mean, let's call what the system is. Let's be pessimistic and aggressively pessimistic about how broken it is and how corrupt these people are and how they put us in this position. But let's be extremely optimistic about the fact that we've got the cards to win. We got them outnumbered. We got a better tool, and we are winning. I mean, we're ultimately going to win because humankind always finds its way forward in spite of, what could be some tough transitions. I mean, a lot of people said to me, what you're describing means there might be a really tough transition point. And that's true. I mean, I can't deny that. I mean, if you really want to get scared, go read the Mandibles, right? that's a that's a dystopian view of the transition. I don't think it has to be like that. I think we can make this transition with in a fair way, with minimal hurt, and I look forward to doing it sooner rather than later, because we all have limited time spans here, and I'd like to see it happen in my lifetime. I also am concerned very much about my kids, who are all in their 20s and thriving, but they're thinking, how am I going to buy a house? How am I going to get the down payment? I mean, they're suffering from the inflation just like everybody else is. So,
no, I absolutely agree that we want the transition as soon as possible. Like, and here many the Bitcoiners disagree with it because they're afraid of this violent transition. But the way I see it, like, without Bitcoin, there wouldn't be a transition at all.
Right.
It would just be dark. Like,
That's right.
and also that getting orange pilled and becoming a Bitcoiner is getting away from the violence. It is the peaceful
Absolutely.
solution. So it already takes away the theft and the threats thereof. Like, it already gives you this lens to view the world through, where you can see that all prices are falling into their marginal cost of production, as Jeff likes to point out. Like,
that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and only by like starting pricing things in sats can you actually experience that, and it's a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
recommend it to absolutely everyone.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, the sense of peace that you get once you really fully understand this and you come to embrace it, it's pretty undescribable. I mean, like, because I've been fighting this monster for a lot of years before Bitcoin even exists. And in 2015, I was close to thinking about giving up. I was just kind of like, I just can't take this anymore. It's brutal. We're never going to win. But I've become aware of Bitcoin in 2013 or 14, bought some, and I started attending conferences, and I got really, really hopeful, because when Safe wrote his book, and suddenly a whole generation of young people understood Austrian economics and understood the flaws in Keynesian economics. And I'm going to these conferences, I'm meeting 20-year-olds who are quoting von Mises, and I'm like, holy shit, this is different. I got, I'm this old gold bug, and I got all these young reinforcements, and they got a better spear. They got gunpowder, and I'm fighting with a spear. So, it's really been super, super exciting and encouraging for me to watch it and be a part of it, and to watch Luke's generation. I mean, you're kind of in between, but to watch Luke's generation, the Jack Mahler's generation, pick up the weapon and say, okay, guys, don't worry about it, gold guys. We got it. We got you covered. we're gonna slay this beast. Because we got we got the right tool, and we're going to slay it. As Hayek said, what is it? A sneaky roundabout way.
Yeah.
Satoshi created something they cannot stop, which is the thing of beauty. So
absolutely. I mean, there's and Mallers is such an eloquent speaker.
Oh,
right?
I love that speech he gave, and I've quoted it in the book. That speech he gave in Miami in 21 when he was talking about El Salvador going.
He was on fire.
He was on fire. We said, "I'll die on this hill." I mean, a lot of us were driven to tears or moved to tears on that shit. It was great.
No, it was superb. And so back into the book. I mean, it's so fun to go off on tangents with you.
Yeah,
I just can't help myself. But like in the writing process, like how is that for you? And do you enjoy it? Like how do you?
I did. It was pretty interesting. It really. I mean, I felt like a higher power was talking to me a lot of times. I mean, I'm a little spiritual, but I mean, it just flew out of me. I mean, once I got the message, once I knew what the message was, and it's actually a woman who she's credited who kind of got me started on writing the book, and she proposed ghostwriting, and I decided not to go with a ghostwriter, but she said something to me that was very, very profound. She said, Larry, she said that, two things about writing a book. One, it becomes your legacy for your relatives, generations later. And two, books can change the world. And she said, they really can change the world. And I thought about that. Wow. That's, I don't know if I've got the skill to do that, but that's kind of what drove me. And I thought, you know what, I see this thing. I'm in a unique position to see it. I don't think anyone sees it quite the way I do. Maybe, just maybe I can write a book that might change the world. And so So it actually just flew out of me. It was like and what happened, my general pattern was I go to bed at 10 and I would wake up at 3 a.m. with a great idea. And so I would write from 3 to 4, and then I would go back to sleep at 4, and then I'd wake up at 6, and then I'd write some more. And so I wrote this book. It's 300 and some odd pages now. I wrote it in 6 months. I started in May, June of last year. So, and it just flew out of me. And then, I will say, full credit and confession, ChatGPT is like a game changer in terms of, research, right? I mean, you can get all the information off of Google, but, I want to know about the Currency Act of 1792. Boom, it just lays it right out. So, I pretty much enjoyed the process. I mean, and then my absolutely brilliant editor, Mel Schilling. Oh my God. I mean, this book would not be half as good as it is, because I'm not that good a writer, but she is. And so I knew what I wanted to say. And then Mel helped me to say it in a way that, was digestible and understandable and grammatically correct. So, I mean, that's the other thing. It's really not my book. It's a crowdsourced book. I've had so much help from so many people, but that's what Bitcoin really is all about, isn't it? I mean, there's Jesse Myers, there's Preston, there's Saylor, there's you guys. I mean, it just, there's Breedlove. It just goes on and on and on. And, everybody, you'll see them. They're all credited in the back, and there are lots and lots of people who've made a contribution. And I think what my value added is that I was able to pull together the best of all these people and put it in the book. I mean, so, I've got some of the Jekyll Island's a great book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, describing the Fed, okay, but it's 450 pages. The average American's not going to wade through that. They're just not. It's just way too much and too dense and too detailed, and it's a great accounting of how they sneakily did it. But, but I think the average American is interested in the fundamental, what happened there. And so if I can boil it down into 4 paragraphs and kind of give you the Reader's Digest version, oh, I get it. They set up a system to screw us. Then that's good, right? And I did that with tons of books. I mean, I grabbed kind of the best of all these things and put it all into one coherent, explainable story, so that, what I've got is, I think, a very comprehensive tool for orange pilling people and helping people out of the monetary predicament that we all find ourselves in today's world.
Now, recognize any of that, Luke? It sounds familiar to another writing process.
Was you guys same thing? Yeah, when you wrote through
very much. It's exactly the same for me. I wake up one day and it all starts pouring out of me, and I view it nowadays like if the work is really. People ask me, when did you start writing the book? And I have no clue. Like, I know that it wasn't when I first pressed the first key on the keyboard.
It was formulated in your mind, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of the process. And the other thing I'd like to echo is Mel Schilling's efforts. Like, she's the unsung heroine of Bitcoin books. She's so great. And she's been with me ever since Everything Divided. With the in the editing, and she's just fantastic at it. So like, big shout out to her. And I know she's done a whole bunch of other Bitcoin books as well. And she's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it's so good to hear, and it's so good to hear like that you got to have this experience. Like,
it was an incredible experience. I don't, people say, well, once you've written one, you'll write more. I'm not so sure. There were times. I mean, and my wife got pretty angry with me at various points in time because I wasn't paying any attention to her. And as you know, when you're doing these kinds of things, you just get obsessed. You know what I mean? I
know.
And 2 things. 1, I got obsessed, and 2, I just didn't want to produce crap. I wanted it to be my best work. And, people may come out and say, hey, I disagree with this, or hey, I don't like it, or hey, it's not even good work. But I'm very comfortable that it's my best work, that I couldn't do it any better than what I've done. So, and I'll rest on that. Right. I mean, that's, so it is what it is. I mean, the $64,000 question, guys, is how, are the dogs going to eat the food? When the dogs read are they going to look at it and go, oh, this is a really good book? Or they go, God, that was just tiresome. I don't want to read it.
No,
I mean, and one of the problems today is, I'm sure you've encountered too, is like, a lot of people don't read that much anymore. They get all their information from podcasts, although there will be an audio version of the book. A lot of people have asked to have me to read it myself. I can't. I've got too many business commitments to do it. I picked Walker America, who's a very good guy with a great voice. He's going to read it for it. And so there will be an audio version. It'll be delayed and it won't be released the day the paperback comes out, but it'll be, a month or something afterwards. So for people who, I've had guys, long haul truckers DM me and say, hey, I drive a truck. I want to read your book, but I don't have time. Are you doing audio? I'm like, yep, I'm doing it. So it's all good.
No, it's fun. It's fantastic. I mean, Luke, what do you think? I mean, you've also had this experience now with making a book and working with Mel and all of this. So, like, yeah, what's on your mind?
I've gotten to read it fairly deeply at this point, and yeah, it's a great history of some stuff that I think a lot of Bitcoiners, non-Bitcoiners won't be aware of, and so far, what I'm thinking is really the key here of the book, what you call the thesis. And I don't think I'm not exactly asking you to spoil the ending or anything, but we're 45 minutes, 50 minutes into a pod here now. So whoever's stuck along to this point, I think has maybe earned a little bit of kind of your thinking about this key point. But why is the big print inevitable? Like, the whole first part of the book basically builds up to that. Like, why is it going to happen?
It's because of the math of geometric compounding. It's really it's actually a math problem. It's not a political problem. If you compound something, I mean, if you go to my Twitter account, you'll see there's a chart that is my pinned chart. It shows that we've grown debt at a rate in excess of the rate that we've grown GDP. And gross domestic product, goods and services. And so history shows through thousands of years that when that happens and you get overly indebted compared to your ability to service the debt, i.e. GDP represents the ability to service the debt, pay it off or pay the interest, eventually something breaks. Either the debt must collapse and become unpayable, or people who, if they control the monetary system, don't want that outcome. And so they print the money to pay the debt, and effectively the debt collapses because you get paid back in dollars or the currency, but so many currency units get created that they're effectively not valuable. Inflation is very, very high. So what really is described, I mean, and there are a lot of charts in the book that show this, and probably the best one is to actually look at the U.S. federal government interest expense, and the U.S. and the growth of the U.S. federal government debt. And if you look at them, what you'll see is just describing them. They're kind of going parabolic. They're going straight up. I mean, the U.S. debt is $36 trillion. We're adding $1 trillion every 3 months, and that rate is growing. The U.S. interest expenses are, we're 400 billion a year. Now we're at 1.2 trillion, and that's going up. And so it's just a kind of it's a continual mathematical compounding of this debt that's going to lead to a day of reckoning, unless somehow, Deus Ex Machina, we find some magical solution. But, in 2,000 years of recorded history, when debt gets this bad, you get a sovereign debt crisis, the currency collapses, or, in biblical times, it was actually, you had to do a debt jubilee, or else, the whole thing fell apart. So really, Luke, the answer to your questions is just math. It's not an emotional view. It's literally just math. And it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that the solution to the problem is just math too, right? I mean, if we, the math is what's causing the existing system to break. And if we go to a monetary system based on a mathematical protocol that's inviolate and immutable and can't be gamed, that will solve the problem. So, wow. I mean, there's real symmetry there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part is of the book describing the problem is going to be really fascinating for especially our listeners who are already quite familiar with Bitcoin.
Right.
But I also liked the second half of the book sort of systematically explaining why Bitcoin is the solution, and then what is your view of what we as Bitcoiners need to do to help the world become a better place? Because I think that's a big part of the second half of the book as
my
well.
view is that Bitcoiners are going to have enormous responsibility because we're going to be silly rich, and I think it's our job to try to help as many people see what we see sooner rather than later, and then it's our job to continue to try and influence society. And this goes back to Knut's point about democracy and so on and so forth, to try and advocate for a fairer society in every way, shape, and form. And by the way, I think those kinds of things are going to happen irregardless. I mean, this decentralization trend is just so strong, and these big governments, these big nation states have outlived their usefulness. I mean, we don't need to have big nation state wars anymore. And we don't need to have, big nation state power. I mean, if you look at what the federal government does, there's nothing they really do that we couldn't, push down to the states except national defense. And I think if we can get a global ban on nuclear weapons, national defense won't become so much of an issue in the future either. So, I think there's going to be a lot of responsibility thrust onto onto Bitcoiners, because they will, by definition, be fairly well-to-do, and which would then give them the time, and maybe people will ask them to be involved in the political process. But I can say this with high confidence: I would have a lot more confidence in any government run by pure Bitcoiners than I have in the existing system. I mean, that's a very low bar to jump over. But and there are some Bitcoiners I don't like, not very many, but I think your average Bitcoiner is generally speaking a pretty balanced and thoughtful person that's going to try and advocate for a better world for everybody, not just for themselves. I mean, I get angry when people point at Bitcoiners and say, "Oh, you're just in this to pump this thing and get rich." I mean, no, that's not really what it's about. I mean, that's a byproduct. It will be financially fine, but to me, what it's really about, I'm in this because I hate government, and I hate what government's done to us. And I hate the system that's killed people and broken so many lives. That's why I'm in this. If I can have enough money that I can eat steaks, I'm a happy camper.
No, exactly. I mean, I think this all goes along with that. I mean, even back to the what you can do without you own thing. Like, if we all have enough and don't have to worry about the necessities of life, but we buy into this new system and put our energy into this new system, then it's going to reduce the consumerism. It's going to reduce the need to stay ahead of the inflation. It's amazing. And I mean, one thing you said that I really agree with is about that the world becomes more fair. The irony, I think, is that that's usually applied in the context of that government has to make the world more fair for people by redistribution, right?
Right.
But the fairness is getting out of the system that is secretly redistributing everything unfairly.
Correct.
That we don't see.
That's correct.
So, yeah,
exactly correct. But sadly, that's not very visible to the average person. And hopefully, this book will help. And I mean, look, this is a first book by me. Somebody will come along and write a better one that'll move the needle more. I mean, I think the Bitcoin Standard really moved the needle a lot. I mean, it's probably the best economics book of the last 100 years. It safely go down in the history books. I think Lynn's book moved the needle further, and this book moves the needle in a slightly different way. I wrote a populist book. I didn't write a textbook. I wrote a book that tried to, get the masses riled up and that anybody can read and can understand, and we can create a mass movement here to return the world to sound money. Because if we return to sound money, it'll be a world that's more like the world I grew up in, which was really great. And there's so many fabulous things that have taken place in the world. I mean, the technologies are just unbelievable. I mean, in spite of all the things that are wrong with fiat, I mean, look at how much technology has made our life better. I mean, I say our life was better in the 70s. Yeah, it was in a lot of ways. We had a middle class and all. But I mean, technologically, gosh, it wasn't, couldn't even touch it. You know what I mean? I mean, I could take 12 or 24 photographs on a camera, and I had to wait, a week to get them back. I mean, There's so many differences between then and today.
No, and that's like my best counter argument to whoever argues for inflation being a good thing is like, well, look at the computing world, like where the
Yes.
cost of a megabyte has consistently gone down over 40 years, and
Right.
people are still buying more and more computers. Like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that. Like,
Right.
I think that's Jevons paradox, isn't it, Luke? Like we wrote about that in book, and that's in Lund's book as well, I think. By the way, what's your preferred way of reading a book? Is it like audiobook or like reading a physical book?
Me personally,
Yeah.
my wife has gone to all Kindle. I actually like having a physical book because I like to be able to hop around quickly and go to the bibliography. If some of the footnotes, I might go there. I also tend to read books with either a highlighter or a pen, and dog ear pages and circle good quotes and try to, because I think, and that's one of the things I think I've done with this book is I pulled out some really, I mean, you read certain things written by other people and like, wow, this guy just nailed it. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I gotta, and full attribution, right? I'm gonna grab that quote and stick it in here because this is a brilliant explanation of this.
Yeah, I know. I know it's fantastic. And Luke, we need to get Larry a copy of Bitcoin: The Universal Clown World, the book we wrote together.
Such a new one. I've got 21 million.
Yeah. I know, but you haven't got this
is
one
it out yet? I should know that. I've been heads down on my book, so I've been reading other stuff.
Yeah, but we'd love to hear what you think about it, and we'd love to see some screenshots of highlights and then earmarks and whatever.
Absolutely.
If you want to.
I know it'll be good. I loved your first book. I just loved it. So
yeah. Thank you.
Well, we'll get you a copy that you can dig into after this book process is over.
Exactly.
No distractions till then.
Yeah, well, while you have any time on your hands, instead of, just working on a book, like it takes a lot of time. It takes up your whole day. But as you say, you want it to be the best it can be. Like, of course, it's your baby.
I mean, this should make sense to you. We spent the better part of 6 months, multiple hours per day together on this last book, and I'm sure you spent about the equivalent. So,
yeah,
I mean,
it's not an easy process if you want to produce quality or try to produce quality. But it's worthwhile doing. And for me, I had a very crystal clear vision of what I wanted to accomplish. And
then it's easy to enjoy the process, right?
Well, that's right. And so I did enjoy it. I mean, I'd write something, I'm like, wow, I got it. I think I got it. And then, of course, I'd come back a week later and say, no, that is, you got to make that better. But, and as I say, it was amazing. It seems to be either 3 a.m. or in the shower. I'd be like, oh my God, I got an idea. and I have to go jot it down quickly before I forget it. So...
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. What you said something before that got me curious. So like before we wrap this thing up and everything, I'd like to pick your brain on one more thing, and that is, you said that you like almost all Bitcoiners, but maybe there's a handful that you don't really like. So in Larry Lepard's mind, what is a Bitcoiner? How do you define the term?
Yeah, well, I think. And I kind of wish I hadn't said that, but there's just a few people who've kind of come after me, and so I'm not very pleased with them. But look, I think generally speaking, if you understand Bitcoin, it means you've got in my opinion, it means you've got a clear thought process and a clear understanding of, what a fair monetary protocol looks like and ought to be. And you don't get to be a Bitcoiner until you've really kind of thought through a lot of the fundamental issues about how our monetary system operates and how our government operates and how the Federal Reserve operates and so on and so forth. And so if you've studied all of those things and then you've studied Bitcoin and then you conclude that Bitcoin is the solution to the problem, that makes you a Bitcoiner in my view. And, I guess what I've found is anybody who's done that and comes to that opinion, generally speaking, shares a lot of the political and other philosophies that I have. I mean, I suppose there are probably some Bitcoiners who are just like, they're on it for the ride and just for number go up. But I don't know. I haven't met many of those. Most of the people I've met in the Bitcoin space are pretty deep and pretty thoughtful. And, they've gone down, they've done the time to get to where to get to where you really believe that this magic internet money is going to be the new mirror of the world, which we all believe, you have to have done the homework, and that's, you have to have read a lot of stuff. You have to have thought it through. You have to understand what the difficulty adjustment is. You have to understand what hash is, and there's no shortcut. And anybody who thinks there is kidding themselves. But once you do that, every layer you peel away, I started off skeptical. I was very afraid it was going to blow up. Technically, I saw DigiCash, I saw eGold, I saw Hashcash, and even Chalmian Money. I saw, and none of them worked. And then, in fact, that's scary. I was aware of this in 2009, and I immediately thought, oh shit, here's another one. This isn't going to work. And I was wrong. I wish I'd taken the time to study it and realize why it was going to work. But once it got going a ways, it started, it went from, pennies to $1, and then $1 to 100. I was like, well, no, hang on a second. Maybe there's something working here. And of course, but even then, would I have put a huge piece of my net worth in it? No, it was still too early, too risky. I met with I was at the MIT forum in, I think 2014, sat next to a core developer. I said, do you trust this thing? He said, no. He said, every night I go home, we made some changes to it. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, Jesus, I hope I didn't croak it. And I was a core developer, right? And I was kind of like, oh shit. I had some coins, handfuls, but I can't put big money in this thing because it's still technically risky, right? But TikTok next block, 16 years, a lot of that risk has gone away.
Yeah, and no risk, no reward in the beginning.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, that's true too. I have enormous respect for Max. almost like a crazy man. He totally aped into it.
Yeah.
And I asked him once, I said, hey, weren't you worried about the technical risk? He said, yeah, kind of, but he knew Antonopoulos pretty well. And he said, he kind of convinced me that it was technically sound. And so I just went with that,
No, it's amazing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So if I peel off another layer of onion on that question, so
sure.
a person, say you have a person that is very technical and understands Bitcoin on a technical level, but doesn't have the ethics nor understands the praxeological foundations or the Austrian economics angle.
Yeah.
And maybe this is why he's unethical, and he uses the protocol to spam it with JPEG information of ugly monkey pictures and sells that as a scarce asset to gullible morons. Is that a Bitcoiner?
No, I don't like those people at all, and that's definitely not a Bitcoiner. Although I will say this, I don't. My view is the system should be open and free, and if people want to put, ordinals or different things on the chain and pay the cost to do it, I don't. I'm very much a freedom maximalist and open market maximalist. I think we should have more miners like Ocean who say, hey, we're not going to support that stuff. We're going to form blocks that have that in it. Okay, that's the solution to that problem. But I don't think we should restrict people from if people want to pay the money to put something on the blockchain that doesn't really add any value, it's their money. I think they have the right to do that. It's just a matter of freedom.
No, I think we're on exactly the same page here, which is probably page 21, by the way. But anyway, Luke, do you have a final question for Larry before we start wrapping this up?
Yeah, well, I think the overall with any book, what is the impression you want to leave readers with after reading this book?
Yeah, well, I like readers to think that here's a thoughtful, honest guy who laid out his best thoughts on this subject, and then I'd also like them to conclude that I'm right for obvious reasons. That and there can be counter arguments, and I'll listen to those and try and counter them. But that I am right, that this monetary system is broken, and that the Bitcoin solution is the correct solution. I think that's this is clearly a sales pitch and an argument. And it's not a pump and dump sales pitch because I don't intend to sell my coins for years. I imagine someday when I get old enough that I'm not working, I'll sell a couple % of my coins every year to pay my bills or whatever I need to do. But Hopefully, it'll be a very small percent because the value have gone up a lot. But I'd like people to take away the beliefs that they learned something, that the author was honest and open about strengths and weaknesses of himself and the argument, and therefore trustworthy, and then from there jump into the conclusion that gosh, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it sounds like his argument's correct, and I should start buying some coins. That's really what I'd like to have happen. And by the way, maybe they get it right away. And you know what? If we really do want to make this world a better place, end wars, do that, Bitcoin fixes this, right? If we really want to do, and that's one of the chapter names, if we really want to have a situation where Bitcoin fixes this, gosh, I got to give this to my friends. I got to recommend this book. I got to give this to my family members. I got to, say, I mean, to the real hard case who says, it's just a joke, it's a Ponzi, it's this, that, and the other. Say, oh, really? Read this book and then tell me if you still think that way. Take the time to do the work. I mean, and they got to do the work. I mean, one other great fear I have with respect to the book is it just doesn't get read, because people just don't read shit anymore. I mean, you got to do the work, but it's, I don't know. I'm not sure how many hours it's going to take to read it, but we'll know when we have it read. But, you got to take the time to read it. But I think if people, let me say this. I really hope that it would be very hard for somebody to read the book and come away thinking, well, that's all bullshit, and Bitcoin's bullshit. I mean, I think there's enough evidence, and the argument is, the book is an argument. I've tried to make an argument, and I'd like that argument to prevail. I mean, it's very straightforward, but it's not an emotional. Well, parts of it are, and the story's emotional, but it's actually the argument's based on logic and fact, and then the story piece has some emotion to make it readable and interesting. It tells my story and all the ups and downs and all that kind of crap. So
yeah, I mean,
that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing that I can say from reading the book so far is that it's a different angle, and I think especially people who are in the current system, invest their money, are doing everything the right way per the current system. I think they'll get a lot out of this book because it really undermines a lot of these.
It'll kind of rattle their world. They'll say, Jesus, I'd never even thought about it this way. Yeah, that's the idea.
But I think to our audience,
TradFi, right? Yeah,
exactly. But I think for our audience, you're exactly right when you say check the book out. I think it'll give a lot of good new points during these arguments with friends and family and whoever you're trying to orange pill.
That's the idea. I mean, I didn't hold anything back. That's why it's as long as it is. I tried to marshal every single possible argument in defense of this, because I really do deeply feel very strongly that this thing is what's necessary to fix the world. I mean, I believe that with every bone in my body, as I know you guys do too. Any hardcore Bitcoiner believes it, and because once you see it, you just can't go back.
No,
that's a good definition of a Bitcoiner.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a good definition of a Bitcoiner. Yeah.
Yes. I guess this episode is recorded about a month before the book premieres, and I think the episode will be released around the release of the book. So go look up Larry Lepard and The Big Print, out now on Amazon, and more importantly on the Bitcoin Infinity store, where you can buy it for Bitcoin.
Yes, absolutely.
Alongside.
Yes, let's get those sats moving around so that we create more of an MOE. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you can also find, of course, the aforementioned Inverse of Clownworm.
Put up the first one.
It is already there. All my old books are re-edited, and there are new versions of them.
I mean,
they're all
divided by 21 million is a fabulous book. Fabulous.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
And a great logo. Right.
Love to hear it. It means a lot coming from you, Larry. And anywhere else you want to send our listeners than Amazon and Bitcoin Infinity Store?
Well, there's in the back of the book, I mean, I have a lot of recommended reading, right? I mean, I think if you read this and you get interested, probably your next book is Safe's, and then Lynn's, and then Jeff's, and there's 6 or 7 other books back there. I've tried to get the highlights, because this isn't the only book on the topic. But I think what this will do, hopefully, is it'll whet the interest of a newbie or a non-aware, person, and then they'll think, gosh, there's more here than I realized, and they'll start reading some of the other books too.
Yeah, and I can directly say that we second all of those recommendations too, of course. So go check out everything. Go follow Larry on X and everywhere else you can follow him. And thanks for listening.
Thanks, you guys. Really enjoyed talking. It's always a lot of fun.
Likewise, Larry. Thanks again. This has been the Bitcoin Infinity Show. Thank you for listening.